Sorry for interruption. Shoham, I think your mic is not working. Ma'am, your mic is also mute.
Yes, I was speaking to someone else, so I have muted the mic for 1 minute.
Okay.
You people carry on.
Sorry. Shoham, we cannot hear you. Shoham, try to remove the headphone.
How about now?
Yes, you are audible now.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another lecture of Voyages into the Past, Otit Provaho. Today we have got a very interesting topic to discuss titled Texts and Archaeology, Case Studies from Early Medieval Western Deccan, to be delivered by Professor Vardha Khaladkar. Professor Vardha Khaladkar hardly needs an introduction. She is researching in the Department of Archaeology at the University of Calcutta. She did her MA in Ancient Indian History and Culture and Archaeology from Deccan College, Pune, and did her MPhil from Jawaharlal Nehru University in 1999. Her research interest is based on proto-history, proto and early history of Western Deccan text in archaeology. She did extensive surveys in the Western Deccan and Middle Bhima Valley region. She had published papers in many academic journals and also presented papers at many national and international conferences. She was a former faculty member at Deccan College and Sanskrit College and University, Kolkata. So without further delay, over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, your mic is muted.
Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to today's talk. Before we start, I just want to give a correction. I'm not a professor. Professor is a very honorable term and it's a very honored post for very senior scholars. So I'm not a professor. You can just call me Varada. And we go ahead. Thanks, Voyages into the Past, for inviting me to this endeavor that they are following, and I saw many interesting lectures that have already taken place here. Today we are going to speak about it, rather I'm going to share what I am doing on the small topic of texts and archaeology, and I'll be discussing 2 case studies from early medieval Western Deccan. Let me be very clear that here I am not going into the problematics of early medieval archaeology, not only in Western Deccan but of the whole India. I am not claiming to do archaeology of early medieval per se. What I am trying to do is when I was doing my field work for my research, I came across certain literary texts and within the field, outside the field as well. And as an archaeologist, how do I deal with these kind of texts which are generally not, let's say, negotiated by people who are working in proto-history or early history, rather proto-history. So I'm just going to, these are very preliminary investigations, so they are not really something coming out very theoretically long drawn projects that I'm going to speak about, but these are very 2 small exercises in dealing with textual sources that one comes across in texts. And I'll be speaking because both of these texts are located chronologically in and around early medieval times. I'm calling it early medieval Western Deccan. As we all know that the relationship between texts and archaeology has always been very complex in South Asia. Archaeology in South Asia began with its dependence on text, with Cunningham doing its surveys based on Buddhist travelogues, and then people trying to find out the archaeological validations or the validations of the epics and Puranas through archaeological remains, and that remains a very popular pursuit even today. And then came the use of land grants and inscriptions, which are very securely dated pieces of evidence and then trying to find the corroborations or synchronisms between the archaeological remains that we get or we investigate and the kind of textual materials or textual sources that we have. Most of the endeavors have really focused into seeking the synchronisms or corroborations into it. There are some very notable exceptions like Alexandra Mackay's study on Vijayanagara Empire and how she has looked into the competing perspectives and how texts and archaeology can share a very complex relationship, etc. And trying to look at the processes behind these empirical details. But these kind of studies are few and far between. Most of the times, even today, when we speak about texts and archaeology, the first impression or the first kind of thoughts are centered on major texts like epics and Puranas. And in the there is a kind of reinvigorated efforts to find synchronisms between or to validate these major texts of religious Indian text through archaeological evidence. As we all know, we are not going into that, but apart from that, there are many other or numerous text or textual resources, or what I would rather say narratives in South Asian archaeology that one comes across when doing archaeology or ancient medieval history, etc. There are normative texts and then there are secular texts. Most of the religious texts are normative, and then there are some secular texts. From early medieval we get a lot of secular texts, and then there are inscriptions, including those on coins. So out of these, inscriptions are more securely dated. They have a lot of they are kind of compressed tablet of information. They will give you information about political dynasties, they will give information about kings, they will give you information about geographical details, about certain administrative details, social religious details, etc. So they are very popular when we try to study the ancient Indian historical processes, and they are kind of many times given more epistemic priority over religious or secular texts. I'm not here to kind of say this is not right or this is right, something. I'm just stating what is happening till now. But apart from that, there are always some minor sources which are not always dated, which are religious, which might be religious in nature, which might be secular in nature. And when one is doing a kind of regional archaeological investigation, these kind of sources keep popping up. And I'll be dealing two kinds of sources today. And the case studies, one is on Bhima Mahatmya, that is a Sthala Purana, or a kind of a sacred text relating to a certain geographical region. Here it is related to a river. And then I'll also be speaking about one set of copper plates, which is a kind of, again, more popular evidence that is used in ancient history, that is copper plate land grant inscriptions. So I'll be speaking a little bit on what I have done during my archaeological investigations, how I have dealt with these studies. So let's start with Bhima Mahatmya. Let me start that it is basically an undated and unpublished text. There is no published or critical edition of Bhima Mahatmya available till date. It is affiliated, the manuscripts say they are affiliated to the Uttarakhanda of Padma Purana. This is a very popular trope of lot of later Sthala Puranas. And Sthala Puranas are basically texts glorifying certain sacred places or areas, and they constitute a very small section of Puranic literature, and they are often clubbed together as minor medieval texts, especially by people, by experts like Jan Khunda. He says these are basically medieval age, they are written in medieval times and they are minor medieval texts, and their study is primarily seen as one helping in the analysis and reconstruction of cultural and religious history, or development of cults and religious practices, local variants of myths, etc. So essentially, such Mahatmyas are objects of research within the domain of literary history or ancient Indian history and religious history, specifically religious, and the people who are working on textual scholars. There are a lot of river Mahatmyas. Here, this Thala Purana has another subcategory, that is river Mahatmya, Nadi Mahatmya. That is, a river is taken up, and then a Mahatmya or the text will elaborate sacred places or the tirthas on its banks, along its banks, and then it will describe all these tirthas right from its source to its end, whether either it falls in another river or it falls in the sea. Across the whole India, you find all these Mahatmyas right from Ganga, Karatoya, Kaveri, Tungabhadra, and Deccan, Narmada. All these rivers have their own Mahatmyas, and Deccan is no exception. So we have Mahatmyas of Gautami, or that is Godavari, Tapi, Krishna, and Bhima, and Karha, etc. So Bhima Mahatmya is that way the better studied text amongst the Mahatmyas and river Mahatmyas that are in Deccan or Western Deccan. The previous work is done by, not work, the first you find mention of this text within the domain of historical studies is by D.D. Kosambi, when he is writing an article on an inscription, early medieval inscription in a place called Padasdev, that is along the banks of river Bhima. And here he mentions that there is such and such text which is mentioned by a resident of that village, and then he went back and checked that manuscript in Bhandarkar, but he says these kind of Puranic texts are really disassociated with the reality. And then there was cultural anthropologist like Anne Feldhaus, who essentially has used its Marathi version to discuss the sacred landscape after the early medieval times, especially the medieval times, and how rivers are perceived in the popular imagination, the popular psyche, etc., etc. And she has worked on the networking and connections between the sacred places, sacred rivers, etc. And then there is one Sanskritist called Eric Sand, who was working on Pandharpur, which is a very important, right? Let's say it was the most important cult center of Maharashtra. Even today it is. And he's working on the Panduranga Mahatmya, Asthala Purana. And then he has critically edited Bhima Mahatmya's relevant chapters and published it. So this is a previous history before I looked into this resource. We know there are 5 manuscripts of Bhima Mahatmya today, and one of them in Copenhagen, and rest of 4 are here, and I have looked into 2 of them. Rest 2 are not complete, so I have looked into 2 of them that are available in Bhandarkar Institute. And then I have kind of come across some references to the sites which I was working while my investigations into the Middle Bhima Valley. Before I go to the discussion of I'll be picking up one site only, and then I'll be discussing how I looked into the archaeology and historicity of it. I'll just speak about in 2 lines about my research. My core research relates to the proto-history and early history of Middle Bhima region, that is from Nira Narsinghpur to Kudal Sangam Solapur, that is largely between the parts of Solapur district in Maharashtra today. And I have been looking into the settlement history, settlement and construction of cultural chronologies into this area for last 10-12 years. And I have done an extensive survey in this area, where I have collected not only the protohistoric or early historic sites information, but I have also documented whatever archaeological information I have come across in all those sites, along with the oral histories that are present in those sites. And in all these exercises, I kind of, they made me take interest into this text. So there is this site of Dhulkhed, which I'll be discussing today very briefly because we do not have much time. So my aim was, when I'm looking into site with Bhima Mahatmya and archaeology of Dhulkhed, is to explore basically, or the mapping, the linkages between the descriptions, the myths, and the historicity and archaeology of these places. I'm also looking into how a place is made, or making of a place, and constitution of sacred landscapes. I'm afraid because of the time constraint, I will not be speaking on last two points right now. We will rather first look into the mapping the linkages between descriptions, myths, and historicity of these places. So Dhulkhed is located on the border of Karnataka and Maharashtra. Bhima River divides it, and on the south, like let's say the eastern bank of Bhima is Dhulkhed, from where the Karnataka starts, and the western bank of Bhima is Dhulkhed. On the eastern bank is a small village which is in Maharashtra. So this is at the moment in the Bijapur district, Karnataka. The site is located on a high Pleistocene terrace, and the previous research is like it is essentially a Chalcolithic site, which was reported by A. Sundara in the survey of the protohistoric survey initiated by M.N. Deshpande during 1957 and 61, and the site was reported as an ash mound which yields Chalcolithic ceramics with affiliation to Deccan Chalcolithic. So but they were basically investigating between the cultural relations between South Indian Neolithic and Deccan Chalcolithic in this border region. And A. Sundara mentioned that this is a very curious occurrence. We all know that ash mounds are more a part of South Indian Neolithic, but here was an ash mound which yielded Deccan Chalcolithic material. K. Padaya visited this site, and he also reported the similar findings. However, when I did a reconnaissance in 2005, then I realized that, and I also did a section clearance later, I realized that it's not only ash mound that is here. You can see a very small whitish spot. This is an ash mound, but the whole village of Dhulkhed is located atop a habitation mound which spans from protohistoric or Chalcolithic times to modern times. And then there today, if you see this white image, this is a medieval temple of Shaiva affiliation. It's now Lingayatic Bhima Shankar Linga. And then I also found a medieval kind of site which is totally destroyed to the north of this village in these fields. And across the river, there is a small village called Chinspur in Maharashtra, which also yields early historical remains. So you realize that it's not only ash mound, but like Professor Padaya has shown in his research, that generally ash mounds were also associated with the settlements in protohistoric times. This has the same morphological arrangement, that there is a habitation, and to the south of it, hardly 50 meters, there is a small ash mound which is very clearly affiliated with the site. Today, this ash mound is like considered as a sacred spot in the village, and there is a small shrine associated with Shiva. You can see there are some sculptures, and then there are some sati stones which were maybe part of cultural assemblage in the village that have been kept atop this shrine. And this shrine is it's now you can see here the deposits. They are whitish deposits which yield essentially cattle bones and Deccan Chalcolithic ceramics. This is a very normal occurrence across all the ash mounds, which they will yield lots of cattle bones, and they will also yield ceramics, because they were created by episodic burning of cow dung, and there are also cultural material dumped into it. And however, every very rest of the ash mounds which we find in North Karnataka, in Andhra Pradesh, what we find is this cultural material. The ceramics have a South Indian Neolithic affiliation. Here they are totally Chalcolithic in nature. And now this whole area has been cleared away of habitation mound. This is I have taken in 2010. But when I first went 2005, this whole area was kind of inhabited atop a mound. Now here only this part of mound is remaining, along with this medieval temple, late medieval temple of Bhima Shankar Ling. It was during the Latur earthquake that the foundation of houses became unstable, and lot of loss. The village suffered a lot of losses in terms of casualties as well as houses. So they have shifted the village to a newer place inside, away from the river, and into Nawa Dhulkhed. And what they have done is they have dug out these deposits to build the houses. However, whatever deposits are remaining, we can see that there is this vitrified ash, remains of vitrified ash. Here that run around the whole village. So in the whole village, if you dig below certain depth, you will find these vitrified ash remains. Here you can see very clearly 2 episodes of ash burning, and here is ash, that is when I was clearing a section, you can see that this ash is going down. So you can see that there are ash deposits within the village as well as there is an ash mound. So how is it related to the text that I am talking about? So Bhima Mahatmya is the only text which mentions Dhulkhed. Dhulkhed today is a very small place, and there is no epigraphic record ever. Rather, Karnataka had lots of epigraphic records in early medieval from 10th, 11th century onwards, but Dhulkhed is never mentioned in any of them. However, it is mentioned as one of the important places in Colonial Gazetteer series of 1885. Now, Bhima Mahatmya speaks of a very interesting legend when it is speaking about Dhulkhed. It speaks about the Daksha Prajapati's Yajna, myth of Daksha Prajapati's Yajna. Now, one has to understand that Bhima Mahatmya essentially speaks about myths from Puranas, epics, okay, and then it claims the affiliation of those places related to these Puranas and epics. And we all know that Puranas and epics do not have the Deccan geography, or the geographical anchors are not within this Western Deccan, but this is their way of seeking legitimacy to the sanctity of these places. But to start with, why a particular place become sacred, that is, for me, that is more interesting, not rather the relation with the myth per se. While Dhulkhed, they speak that this is the place where Daksha Prajapati performed his yajna, the famous yajna where he did not invite his daughter Sati. And when Sati came on her own, she was humiliated, and that's why she chose to immolate herself. Okay, so this myth is coming here, and they say that Paschima Dwaram Ashrityam Društva Chvaiva Mahotsavam. She came through the western gates and saw the whole festivities. And for me, this sentence is very interesting because the residents claim that the older way was from the approach to the village was from the to western gates. Today, it has slightly gone down. It's like this road that comes from the highway is here to the west, and then comes from the west, and the road today goes from the south. But the residents claim that earlier the road would just go like this and end up at the village through western side. So I also asked my Sanskritist friends if the yajna has any specific sanctity to the western gate. So, and they said no, there is no such sanctity or special significance attached to it. So maybe the person who's writing it was aware of the local topography. That is one conjecture or the inference I might make. And then Sati immolates herself, and after Shankar, Shiva comes to know about this, he comes there and he destroys the whole area that we all know. He destroyed the yajna, he razed the whole area. And therefore the text says, Tena Maheshwarena iva Daksha yajnyo dhuli krutaha tatra krutam dhulakhetam kshetram parama pavanam swanam nacha krutam tatra tirtham maheshwaram varam. So here they are explaining the name of Dhulakhed. Okay, it is very clear from the description that the name Dhulkhed predates this description in the text. Okay, so they are actually trying to explain why there is so much ash in the village. They said this is the place where Shiva destroyed the yajna performed by Daksha Prajapati, and that's why there is so much ash. And if you go to the village today, they are not aware of the text called Bhima Mahatmya, but they will give you the same oral tradition that this is the area, this is the place. The ash mound is a place where Daksha Prajapati performed his sacrificial rituals, yajna, and that's why this is sacred. Even today, you cannot go atop that hill with your shoes on. That whole area is marked off as sacred area, and it's kind of it is associated with the Puranic myth of Daksha Prajapati. But however, I inquired, even the older residents are not aware of the text Bhima Mahatmya. Today, it is just a local cult center which is affiliated to now Lingayat or Virashaiva cult, and there are no connected places as yet. What happens is, in India, the places don't physically transcend the sacred places. What happens is there is a replication of place, or there is a connection, there is a hierarchy of place, or there is a family of connected tirtha kshetras, etc. But no such thing has happened about Dhulkhed. It has never rose to that kind of prominence. However, for me, it is very interesting that today a very minor tirtha gets merited a whole adhyaya or a chapter in a text which was which was created according to the most of established Sanskritist in medieval times. I do have certain objections, or do have certain queries about that. I'll come to it just now. But before that, so this is very interesting, where the local oral tradition seems to have been documented in the text. Okay, and this text, if you look at it, this is geographically uneven when it comes to the description. There are total 42 chapters, and first 21 chapters are only about the source of Bhima, that is Bhima Shankar, and the area around it. So, and then from 22 to 34, it is still in the upper Bhima Valley till Niryanarasimhapur, and only from 34 to 42, that there are only 8 chapters or 8 adhyayas which describe almost more than half of the progress of river Bhima. And so only important the tirthas at the time of the constitution of the text get mentioned, and they get the whole adhyaya, like Pandharpur or Pundarika Kshetra, it gets one. Pundarika Kshetra gets one adhyay. Niryanarasimhapur, so Nrsimhapur gets one adhyay. And then Dhulkhed gets one merited with one adhyay. So for me, it shows it was looked as a very important place, and they are kind of they are trying to explain the occurrence of archaeological mound through myth. They do not understand why it was considered. Today we know that it is essentially the episodic dumping and burning of cow dung. For them, it was sacred and something unique that does not occur in any of the known surrounding landscape, and thus this unusual occurrence gets merited with a kind of myth to explain away its being there. And the antiquity begets sanctity, because this is a very ancient remain. If you look at the cultural history or the settlement history of Deccan, there is a kind of gap or a hiatus between proto-history and early history, which is not yet satisfactorily explained away. But we believe that there was a kind of shift from sedentism to the nomadism to a large extent. But from early history onwards, we see that there is a kind of a continuous settlement histories in hundreds of villages in this region, and Dhulkhed is no exception. So, and the local oral histories will persist. But because these remains are even beyond their memories or the living memories of settlement history, they kind of probably got awarded the sanctity, because they are there since their forefathers and forefather of forefathers started living in this place. This text, which is kind of a very minor text, it documents not only an archaeological site through a different trope. Obviously, the trope will be to explain it into the Puranic myth, but it also kind of tries to explain the surroundings. And I find it interesting because there is also a parallel myth or a description in Gautami Mahatmya, that is Godavari Mahatmya. I have not worked into it. I have just come across it, the reference through Anne Feldhouse's work on river and womanhood, because there she mentions that there is a place called Pippalika Tirtha mentioned in Godavari or Gautami Mahatmya, and it also speaks about a sacrificial fire that Brahma performed there. Okay, so she's associated this with the proximity to the river, etc., etc. But for me, I found it very interesting because Pippalika is the Sanskritized version of Marathi word Mungi. Mungi is basically ant, and Pippalika is also ant. And there is actually a site called Mungi, which is protohistoric and early historic in its chronology, documented on the banks of Davari in 1960s. Okay, so for me, this is very interesting that two very old places get mentioned as tirthas. Today, nobody even knows the places called Mungi or Dhulkhed. They are just nameless, faceless villages and around millions of villages like them in peninsular India. But they merited the whole adhyaya in the respective river Mahatmyas, and because they have the ancient remains. So this is something very interesting that I came around when I'm looking at the text. And for me this is interesting because we know that texts are these kind of texts are to be situated into their they're historically situated narratives, they are discursive, they are dialogical in process when they are created. So we have just kind of not dismissed but not really looked into these texts because they are minor medieval texts. So it kind of focuses that we need to look into the text in a detailed manner. I'll again pick up this thread at the end of my discussion. I'll shift to the next case study. So this is about a small archaeological site which is kind of famous for its protohistoric remains, or it is important for its protohistoric remains. I just forgot to add, because this is very unique site, because it is not unlike any other Deccan Chalcolithic site found as yet. So this is a site on the borderlands at the cusp of two archaeological cultures. So it has imbibed kind of cultural influences, or the kind of traditions from both the cultural lifeways, and it has its own unique place in the Deccan proto-history. And again, the place is occurring, this site is occurring very curiously into the river Mahatmya. So this is about Dhulkhet that I tried to understand. I have also tried to work and how it kind of making of a place is happening. And okay, there was one more thing. I situate this text in early medieval for one thing, because this text very curiously does not mention a very famous cult spot called Ganagapur, that is in district Gulbarga, Karnataka today. It's a very important cult center for Dattatreya sect, Dattatreya cult. Okay, the deity the divinity Dattatreya, who is a combination of Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, the kind of Indian trinity, and it rose to its prominence in 14th century along with the Saint Nrsimha Saraswati. Very curiously, there is no mention of Ganagapur in Bhima Mahatmya. So the Bhima Mahatmya, the large part of Bhima Mahatmya, has to have been written in the pre-14th century, according to me. So that's how I situate it chronologically, and that's why I call it a early medieval text, although most of the texts have been looked as medieval in making. Then I moved to another place called Chikurde copper plates, another source. Okay, so this is kind of more familiar with all of us who deal with ancient history, early medieval history, archaeology, etc. That is copper plates. There is this set of copper plates, presumably from 12th and 13th century CE. I say presumably because they have often been regarded as spurious, or the forgeries which were made probably also in later period, we do not know, and this debate has never been satisfactorily solved. They were retrieved from a place called Chikurde, a very small faceless kind of ordinary village in today's district Sangli, but they are very near to Kolhapur, 4 miles north. So that should be 8 to 10 kilometers north of modern city of Kolhapur. And they were retrieved from, or they were in kind of possession of a Dhangar woman. Dhangars are the very popular, very ubiquitous semi-nomadic shepherds in Western Deccan, especially in this south area of South Maharashtra. So there was this a very dominant clan. Gaudes are even today the very dominant clan of Dhangars, and they still have a very large presence in Chikurde. They have their settlement in Chikurde, and from a woman there in 1905, V.K. Rajwade, a nationalist historian and an explorer par excellence, he kind of collected, retrieved it from that Dhangar woman, and he read it. There is no eye copy of this inscription, so that is the major hindrance to study of it. But he kind of copied down whatever he got, and he made a basic kind of study of this copper plate. But because he was nationalist and his agendas were kind of different, and he tried to place it in 7th century and claimed that this is the earliest Marathi copper plate, which it is not. Later on, it was criticized, and very rightly so, and it was conclusively shown that the language it shows it's basically more akin towards 13th century Marathi, and it's a mixed language. It's Sanskrit, Marathi, and a few words of Kannada. It is issued by Janamejaya Chakravarti of Anegundi. There is no date mentioned. It is just mentioned that it is issued in Bhava Samvatsar of and Vaishakha month. Okay, so there is no such date particularly mentioned, but it is issued by one Janamejaya Chakravarti of Anegundi. Now we know that there are 3 more grants by Janamejaya Chakravarti of Anegundi. They have been published by L. Rice in 1939. Anyways, this grant is given to one Manneya Ram Gavunda, and he is the Madahasti Pala Rakshaka Palaka. He is the keeper of the elephants, and the grants are also made to village deity Mulasthana Deva, and very interestingly, other communities of the village Chikalavada. They say the Chikalavada is the name of the village, and there are various communities like there are barbers, there are oilmen, there are goldsmiths, then there are washermen, Rajaka, and there are various communities to whom the grants have been given by this Manneyaram Gaunda. And for me, this and the villages are mentioned are Chikalavada, Baliyavada, Devula Grama, Aita Grama, Stanapa Grama, Amalaka Grama, and Chikala Grama. So there are kind of 7 to 8 villages mentioned. So up till now, this is a very kind of a commonplace copper plate that you get in early medieval times, that you have some land grants where donors and donees are mentioned, some kind of date or chronology is mentioned, and then the donations are described. And generally what happens is that they describe the 4 borders of the grant. So to the north, this is the village, that is the village. So generally the borders are described in terms of villages. Now these land grants are kind of primarily used because of this information in ancient India to reconstruct political and economic history, and which is examined through at times the framework of dynasties, etc. The geographical information contained in the charters is rarely explored beyond the place name identifications, and then we try to understand aspects of administrative divisions, etc. And then we also try to understand the economic or revenue practices or the social groups that are mentioned. So this is the kind of general usage of the information that, or the content of the copper plates that happens within the domain of ancient Indian history. And archaeology is kind of, again, when it comes to grants, it just looks at the place names or the administrative divisions. There are always early medieval archaeology is anyways a very problematic domain within South Asian archaeology, and recently people have been writing about it. We all are kind of pointing out the problems. Even in my article in Chikude, I try to map out how early medieval is kind of dominated by the textual content rather than the archaeological sites or the spatial template. There have never been any attempts to understand the spatial characteristics or the morphologies or the typologies of the settlements, etc. through these charters, the study of these charters, especially in Deccan, and they have never been they are rarely been archaeologically mapped and explored. That is the problem. Most of the studies are kind of relegated to the specialist of in epigraphers, but archaeologists, when they try to use this data, they are kind of just rely on these decipherments by the experts. And I believe that archaeology has more to do in this matter, because we can always go and archaeologically explore these places. These charters are kind of anchored to a geographical context. Apart from the production context, they are also anchored to a geographical context, archaeological context. They are a part of material culture that we are looking into. So you really need to go beyond thus the empirical data that is coming out of these plates. And so back to Chikude copper plates. Okay, so before that, I'll just show you the location of Chikude. Chikude is here, and this is a very, very fertile region of the Krishna basin and the rivers Varna, a tributary of Krishna, and Morna, which is a tributary of Varna. The minimum precipitation is 800 millimeters annual precipitation, which is very high compared to this region of Bhima, and this is Dhulukhed, which is hardly gets 500 millimeter of annual precipitation, and that too in a very variable way. So Chikudek sits in a very fertile region of Kolhapur and surroundings it's today in Sangli district, Maharashtra. So what happened is, why this grant is different, because when it comes to the description, it does not stop itself at the names of villages, that is 4 borders, but very interestingly it goes into the details of landscape around these villages. So it mentions a whole lot of information which is very unique when it comes to the Western Deccan land grant charters. So what kind of landscape it describes? It describes perennial water streams. There are minimum 5 different water streams with their names have been identified, including rivers. There are pools in those rivers that have been identified. Then there are wells with their names, like there are Vapi Viris like Bhaskar and Savita. They speak about the stones engraved with peacocks. They say these stones are hidden in dust and soil. They also speak about the stones engraved with snake hoods, the stones engraved with elephants. They speak about Veeras, or Veeras are probably hero stones or not, we do not know. Then they also speak about, very interestingly, heap of cow dung. Like, they will say to the north of village Aita Grama there is a heap of cow dung. So they are trying to describe it through like this. They also speak of a heap of iron ore, heap of white stones, a heap of dress stones. They say Akantriva Pashana. When you look at the language, it is very clear that it is essentially Marathi, and many Marathi phrases have been translated or they have been Sanskritized, as the kind of general norm was at that time. You see this reflected in many other charters as well, where the Deshi names, Deshi is non-Sanskrit, Deshi is not ethnic, by the way. Deshi is which is not Sanskrit. So Deshi names kind of being Sanskritized for the sake of writing those charters. So like there is Dapodi, a village of Pune today, so that occurs as Darpapurika. Okay, Bhosri, another village of city Pune, will occur as Bhesurika. Pandarige, which is Pandharpur, will occur as Pandurangapur. So this is, or Pandarangapalli. So this is a kind of Sanskritization which seems to be the norm in those times. So they are kind of doing, Akantriva. So they are also trying to translate the terms here. So we are okay. So like they say that to the south of the borders of Aitagrama and Deulgrama, there is a mound of dust and soil. What really attracted me when I was reading the inscription was it mentions that there is a mound of dust and Raja Mritika Bhumi Masta Teki Kanta, a mound of dust and soil with stones carved with X and arrow above it. So there is a small mound which is of dust and soil. They do not say a hillock. There is a hillock, there is a small hill there, and which is mentioned differently, and it is mentioned as a parvata, which or a giri, and that is there today, even today. But here they speak about a mound, okay, Teki Kanta, and which is atop on them there are carved stones. And why did I find it interesting? Because as an archaeologist, when I'm moving in the field and documented habitation mounds, often which are uninhabited or which are away from the villages, have some kind of shrine on it. There is a regular practice in Western Deccan, and I believe it's not only in Western Deccan, even in the other parts of peninsular India and India, fellow archaeologists have noticed this, that the older mounds have some kind of shrines above them or some kind of places above them. If you remember, like those who are familiar with the Maharashtrian history, Aurangzeb the Mughals had destroyed the city of Pune, and when they destroyed it, they installed an undressed stone above the destroyed city of Pune, or the remains of Pune. You know, that is the description. And when the Shivaji with his mother, when he was a kid, he came in his boyhood to the Pune. Jizabai removed it, and it is said that she plowed those remains with a gold plow, you know, to indicate that they are going to rehabilitate the city again. What I found interesting, again, the story of this undressed stone or dressed stones being placed atop abandoned ruins, even in this medieval story about Shivaji. And here, so for me, this description of Mount of Dust and Soils was very interesting, and I realized they are probably speaking about an older habitation mound. They also speak about the shrines of Bhagavati Pada, Rudra Pada, Bhairava Pada. So they are speaking about shrines around them. They also speak about Shvetavalu Mritika Kshetra, that is a field or the area of white soil and sand. So we do not know whether these are conker or carbonate deposits, but for me, today I know in modern Marathi, or even in the old Marathi, if you see the old medieval Marathi also, Pandhari, or it's a feminine derivative of adjective white. Okay, Pandhra is white and Pandhri is the feminine root of it. So Pandhari is a normal designation of older habitation ruins, as well as the living habitation. Pandhri is habitation. So even the older habitations are mentioned as Pandhris. So for me, the question was, are they kind of Sanskritizing this Pandhri? Because there is no such Shweta, Valu, Mritika kind of, it has no significance in Sanskrit per se. It is just a cluster of words. Okay, it has no cultural association or cultural meaning in Sanskrit, but in Marathi, white soil has a very distinct cultural association, that of associated with older habitation ruins. And that was something which kind of propelled me to do the field work along with my academic associates, and we did a basic field work around this area and documented the mapped archaeological ruins around there. So we will just discuss these ruins in brief. So from Chikude, what we realize that most of these places, okay, have older archaeological remains. To be very honest, let me be very clear. When we speak about these land grants in early medieval periods, it is generally assumed through this North Indian model, which has become a kind of hegemonic model to understand, or it was a hegemonic model to understand the rest of Indian early medieval cultural processes. It was kind of seen that post-Gupta period, these land grants are given to colonize the lands. In Deccan, something different is happening, because what we see is that there is no mention of colonization. Okay, the land grants seem to be just restructuring or reallocation of existing revenue resources or revenue procurement arrangements. So they are being given to some other person. They are already in the existence. They are not being given to the Brahmins for going into the jungle or going into the uninhabited lands and giving them initiative to colonize it, so that they will collect the revenues from there. This is not happening in Deccan. What is happening is just it's a kind of reallocation of these revenues to other people. You know, these settlements pre-exist, the revenue structures pre-exist. It's just restructuring of the revenues through land grants. So that is very clear. So all the villages that are mentioned in the grants are pre-existing. That is for quite sure. And out of these three, Devarte, Mangle and Aitavre Budruk have already been surveyed and reported as early historic sites by one Niranjan Kulkarni, who has worked into the early historical sites of Upper Krishna Basin. So he has already reported these sites. What I found that from Chikude, Devarte and Mangle, okay, so I'll just, Devarte is Devulagram, Chikude is Chikhalagram. I had missed on this slide where we have mapped basically the place names to the modern names. Thanapure is Stanapagram, Mangle is Amalakagram, Aitavde Khurda and Aitavde Budruk. There are two Aitavdes. But looking at the kind of directions that are provided in the charter itself, we believe that Aitavde Budruk, and Budruk is the larger village, Khurda is the smaller village. So Aitavde Budruk seems to be the most probably the Aitagram mentioned in this charter plate. Those who are listening from Maharashtra, this is the native village of Karmavir Bhaurao Patil, who was a great educationist and social reformer in early 20th century. Aitavde Budruk is his village, so it is kind of an added perspective to it. So this is and Chikhalabadi is that Chikhalagram, and there is this village on there is this hill on which there is a small cave. I could not go and visit the shrine atop, but the residents of Chikude told me that yes, tallying with the this inscription details, there is actually a shrine above this hill. So and this is the Varna river mentioned as Varuvenna in this charter. So this is the place name identification, and then there is a small Bhavani temple which could have been the Bhagavati Pada, and there is a field. So we tried to locate a field with white sand in its vicinity. I'll speak about that a moment later, but we could not find. I was looking. They say that on the banks of a stream called Varaha Taraha, there is a Rajatam Mritika Bhumi Mastaka Tekikanta. So that is a mound with dust and soil. So they are seem to be mapping their whole landscape with even to the minutest details. So when I looked into it, the archaeological record we surveyed, we realized that the three settlements of Chikude, Devade, and Mangle go back to the Chalcolithic times, and Aitavde Budruk gave us only the chronology from early historic and medieval. I could not spot anything that is early medieval there. But again, the identification of early medieval is a very problematic area or a gray area as far as Western Deccan is concerned, especially for the surface surveys, because the ceramics are not at all well indexed. We are not aware of the proper indexing of early medieval ceramics, unlike early historic or medieval or Chalcolithic. Early medieval is generally designated on the basis of temples, sculptural remains, their styles, or hero stones, etc. So from Aitavde Khurd, we again got the whole sequence from early historic to medieval to today. Then there was this Mahalakshmi temple that we located near village Karanzavde. Karanzavde is not mentioned, but there is a Mahalakshmi temple we wanted to see with it could be the Bhagavati Pada, but it is medieval in the nature. There is a Shaiva figure that is today put a brass mask on and portrayed as Mahalakshmi, and Thanapure also gave me early historic to modern remains. And then very interestingly, slightly detour from this Chalcolithic pottery. This is from Mangle, and these two sherds which I picked up from Chikurde are late Jorve in the nature. Late Jorve is the last phase of Chalcolithic, which is quite a debated phase where earlier researchers have hypothesized that this is only restricted to the Bhima Valley because these people faced very deep famines and adverse environment. They were forced to become nomadic. As I told you during the last part of Bhima Mahatmya, that there is a hiatus between settlements of proto and early history. So this late Jorve was supposed to be restricted only towards the famine-prone areas of Bhima Valley. But very interestingly, I have documented these two sherds. They are the first known late Jorve sherds from outside the Bhima Valley, that too from the area which never ever faces any famine. This is the most one of some of the most fertile areas that Western Deccan has. So again, we need to kind of rethink our understanding of the end phase of Chalcolithic. Anyways, coming back from detour, this is early historic quern, which is lect quern, which is broken into two and kept in the shrine as a mother goddess from again the village of Chikurde. And this Malava, that is the early phase Chalcolithic, was documented from the village of Mangle. So these two are the remains. So this whole thing is a very interesting or a unique occurrence. For me, what was interesting is that they are describing their landscape to the minute detail, which is very unique in the whole Deccan. Okay, if you go to Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, you have similar charters where they describe the surrounding landscape in detail, but in Maharashtra or in Deccan this rarely happens. So, and again, there is one more similar copper plate, that is Miras copper plate, which is very similar to this content, that is issued by Satyashraya Chalukya in 1024 CE, and but which has a very similar writing style. It is also issued to a kind of elephant keeper called Saigolappa. So it is hypothesized either this plate is a forged plate based on that, or this has been kind of issued by the or the written by the same scribe. We do not know. This is one of the hypotheses. And this Janamejaya Chalukya has 3 more grants which have been read by L. Rice in 1939. They also seem to be very rich in the landscape content. There is also a reference of mound in one of those grants, but they are in Kannada, and I am not a Kannada expert. I do not read Hala Kannada or ancient Kannada, so I depend on the translations only, and I do not see if anyone has gone into the exploring all these places mentioned in the charter and tried to actually verify what kind of remains have been found there. When we come to the archaeological mapping of Chikude, we realize that most of the smaller portable remains like hero stones, snake stones, okay, they are now no more they couldn't be found or recorded. And it is very clear that after a gap of, let's say, even 700, 800 years or even 500 years, these portable artifacts can be broken, they can be discarded, or they can be removed and replaced in some other context. Like in most of the villages today, we see that they just collect all the hero stones, sati stones, snake stones, whatever they get within the boundaries of the settlement, and then they just put it in front of the temple. And this could have also happened in the place of Chikurde. But what is interesting is that when we try to go beyond these empirical remains, one is mapping them archaeologically. Okay, I could not map or we could not find this original ancient mound that they were probably talking about. When we went to this Bhagavati Pada or Mahalakshmi temple in Karanjavde, there is a stream nearby, and across the stream there is very heavy sugarcane field, and the residents there said yes, there was a mound within those sugarcane fields, but now it has been leveled. And from the fields in front of the Mahalakshmi temple in Karanjavde, we actually found a red slipped ware, which is early historic in affiliation. So there was a part of this Shweta Valumritika, or there was this white soil or habitation deposits that in the vicinity of these Bhagavati Pada. This could have been so, or it could have been some different place, because the idol that is installed there today is clearly medieval in origin. So the dating problems remain. But what I am trying to say, that one really needs to start this mapping archaeological remains is a departure point for these kind of inscriptions. For me, what is interesting is that how they perceive the landscape around them. Whether it's a spurious grant, whether it's actually a genuine grant, let's put that aside, because often that kind of becomes a criteria of validating a source for your study. But I think within archaeology we can really go beyond this and try to understand what are the kind of production contexts, what are the cultural realities of the users and makers of these grants, the scribe, the donee, and the donor. Why would a grant come into it, and how they are perceiving their surroundings. It is there that most of the gram here, we say that they are all grammars. Okay, there is no hierarchy between them. And these grammars are also kind of, when they are speaking about the boundaries of the grammars, they are including the fields surrounding them, the portable archaeological remains within them, the wells, the streams. So there are natural landmarks, there are fields, and the human landmarks. That is something I find very interesting, and it is more akin to the revenue marking of the boundaries of villages even today, where the revenue boundaries of villages in Maharashtra, at least, all these are we have nucleated villages in Western Deccan, mostly apart from the coastal part. So the Deccan Plateau, these nucleated villages, the village boundaries always include the fields and the natural landmarks around them. The similar kind of style you can see in this land graph charter. Very interestingly, if at all they are mentioning the habitation mounds, they are mentioning habitation mounds which become the natural landmarks, and not the habitation mounds which are already existing below their villages itself. Now we know that all their villages are atop habitation deposits, almost everybody, and they are very deep habitation deposits. All these, they are going very deep histories, actually chalcolithic and early historic. So 2000 and 3000, 4000 years have their chronological span is there, and yet they are not speaking about the deposits that are below their settlement, but they are speaking about the deposits which are away. Okay, so they have got a kind of a cultural significance. However, in these descriptions, these possible mounds do not have any sanctity awarded to it. Like it has been awarded to the Bhima Mahatmya Dhulkhed Mount, there is no sanctity awarded to this. They are just, they remain a natural landmark or a kind of boundary identification markers, etc. So this perception of landscape details is generally not evident when we speak in about archaeological evidence in early medieval times. We speak in kind of large chronological brackets and piecemeal categories of evidence. We have not really understood the settlement dynamics at settlement templates, because there has very few attempts to do that. So I believe studying land grant charters like this to understand kind of these things archaeologically can be a departure point from all this. Apart from this, again, I think I should, I will wind it up, because there are a lot many things to talk about, but I will just speak now briefly about this. For me, dealing with these textual resources, see, these textual resources are dealt with in various ways, and this is not the only way I am trying to look into it. But I'm just, for today's talk, I have just picked up one common thread within them, and that's what I kind of built my whole speech today. I am not looking into another aspects. Those who are interested can go and read my article. My Chikuda article has been published in 2015, and Bhima Mahatmya, a very preliminary article has been published, because that work is totally incomplete. I am still looking into the text side by side my work. So Bhima Mahatmya will take some more time to complete, but Chikuda article kind of preliminary investigations were complete and it was published. For me, what is very important in those texts are the records of ancient or past remains. When we are speaking about ancient text or textual sources, we speak about a plethora of possible information or the leads of information that we get from as an archaeologist, as a historian. Okay, but rarely this, or I would say I have never come across kind of a investigation which discusses pre-medieval consciousness towards their towards the older archaeological remains. It has never been looked into in India, or maybe in South Asia. I don't know. I won't comment about South Asia, but in India, I have never really come across a study where now people are. There is a need to look into this aspect, because it is very clear that by early medieval or medieval times, people would have, like they were aware in Europe, they must have been aware of the older archaeological remains around them. They must be having their own cultural explanations or explanatory devices to understand them, and they obviously constituted an integral part of their everyday landscape. Okay, so but we have rarely looked into this part, and these two sources coming from very different categories. Like Bhima Mahatmya, again, I spoke only about Dhulkhed, but Dhulkhed is not the only archaeological site that it mentions. It also mentions a site called Palasdev. Palasdev is known for its temples, but it is also known for, like, Kosambi has already, I spoke about Kosambi in the beginning of my speech, and there he has talked about how Palasdev has also yielded very old pottery remains. Okay, now this whole village has been submerged in the backwaters of Ujjini Dam on Bhima, so no further archaeological investigation is possible. But he speaks about an ancient site which is at least has to be early medieval. And then Palasdev is again has a whole adhyaya dedicated to it, Today, Palasdev is a very kind of site of local significance. Another almost unknown site is Khed, and Khed is Khed near Bhigwan or near Palasdev. This Khed is almost unknown to almost everybody except proto-historians of Western Deccan, because Khed is an unexcavated but a very important late Jorve Deccan Chalcolithic site, now almost surrounded like an island within the backwaters of Ujni Dam. Okay, and that site has been just reported in 1960s, and it has been re-examined by Sheena Panja and Sonali Naik and Sheila Mishra in 90s, and there hasn't been a very detailed study on it, but we all know, those who are working in Chalcolithic, that it is a very important site. And in Bhima Mahatmya, there is a whole adhyay dedicated to this one tirtha. They say this is related to, they speak about the whole Ramayana, the Katha, and then they say there was this king called Kheda Raja, and he performed a yajna or a sacrificial fire ritual on the banks of Bhima, and then there is a description of this whole tirtha. Today this Khed is almost anonymous, and it is forgotten even by the archaeologists, but the Bhima Mahatmya gives a whole adhyay to it. So for me it is very interesting, because this Mahatmya is actually documenting the oral traditions and the archaeological site or the ancient sites which are probably looked as sacred by the then contemporary residents, and that's how the whole Nadi Mahatmya is coming up, and we as an archaeologist have rarely looked into it. For me, it is also important because it has a very deep implication for archaeology in terms of our framing the survey strategies. When we go into this field and frame the survey strategies, generally after sampling, there are certain basic strategies in fieldwork or the exploration strategies, like sampling. Then there are certain geographical factors that we look into, and then we also look into colonial records, because we do not have this tradition of kind of objective landscape descriptions in our traditional texts. That I totally agree with, but now it is very evident that there are different tropes and explanatory devices used for many ancient sites, and they might be scattered. The references and the stories and the myths might be scattered across many such texts. I just came across Bhima Mahatmya through Kosambi, Didi Kosambi, and then I looked into the sources, and then I realized it's not only Dhulkhed or the Palasdev, but there is whole lot of sites. And then I also realized the reference which I had read earlier about the Pippalika Tirtha in Gautami Mahatmya. So this whole Nadi Mahatmyas and Sthala Puranas they also need to be kind of, and other textual resources. Again, the Chikurde, it's not only the administrative geographical details that the charter is giving that are always important. I am not kind of undermining their importance, but apart from that, we are also kind of looking at the landscape. So there is one avenue is looking into the perceptions of landscapes, and other is if such charters are also documenting any archaeological references to possible archaeological remains, and can we go back and we need to integrate these kind of text and references into the template of our survey strategies. When we look into the surveys and framing the surveys, I believe now we need to go back to our ancient sources as well, the textual sources as well, with a kind of new framework, and looking into these kind of texts can be the point of departure into all this. So this is today just I wanted to focus on this this particular aspect. So I'm not going into other details right now, sorry for that, but I think I have spoken for more than an hour. So I will stop here, and I will convey my acknowledgements. All these studies and my fieldworks wouldn't have been possible without lots of my friends and lots of people otherwise who have always supported me. First is Dhulkhed residents and Dhulkhed Panchayat, who allowed me to dig there to clear a section. And believe me, I do not know Kannada, and they also don't really know Marathi that well. We operated through an interpreter who also helped me, but they were the nicest people in my whole fieldwork of 5 years. That they were the kind of nicest bunch of people, Dhulkhed residents. Then CASTI, Center for Archaeological Studies and Training, Eastern India in Kolkata, who funded me for 2 years of fieldwork, without whom going into kind of, very deep into Middle Bhima Valley area, Solapur and North Karnataka wouldn't have been possible. Then I also heartily thank my friend Dr. Ambarish Khare, who's a very expert Sanskritist and who was always there. Even though Bhima Mahatmya is written in a pretty simple Sanskrit, which I mostly understand, I know the basics of Sanskrit, he was always there to kind of correct my readings and really help me with all the readings. I rely on him very heavily for this. For my friends, Dr. Manjari Bhalerao, Anand Kanetkar, Ambarish Khare and Kalpana Rairikar, who accompanied me on Chikude fieldwork, we all did it together as a team. And they all came in with their different expertise, and then that's how we kind of built up this investigation. And we know this is just a preliminary investigation. There is still a lot of scope going ahead. And I would like to thank Mr. Shahaji Patil from Chikurde, Mr. Abhijit Naik from Walwa, and residents of Chikurde and all other village who have really hosted us very lovingly, affectionately, and who made this fieldwork possible. And in the last, I thank Voyages into the Past to have invited me here and allow me to speak here in this exalted gallery of speakers otherwise who have spoken here. So I thank you all, and I end my speech here. And all of you stay safe and keep watching this space, because I'm sure they are going to come up with far more interesting lectures after this. Thank you. We can't hear you, Mr. Sohandas.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
you're audible now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a really pleasure listening to you. It was, from my limited knowledge, I can only tell that it was a very lucid and clear presentation. And
Thank
within
you.
this limited time constraint that we had, you have touched upon almost every aspect from this topic that we were discussing. Now we can head towards the question answers.
Sure.
There are lots of questions to be asked.
Okay.
First, ma'am, I have a personal question. Can we take that
Yes,
first,
sure.
please?
Sure.
Yes. So you mentioned that the common villagers of Dhulkher have rarely heard of the text Bhima Mahatmya, but know
Yes.
about the sacrificial rites of Daksha Prajapati. So
Yes.
how successful was the text in accommodating local traditions along with the general history?
See, I believe that these are oral traditions which have been included by the maker of the composer of Bhima Mahatmya into the text. Okay, like the residents of Palasdev, older residents of Palasdev, when Kosambi visited there in 1960s, they mentioned him the text Bhima Mahatmya. Okay, so they knew it. So possibly the older residents in Dhulkhed might have known. Today, nobody knows it. Okay. Again, Bhima Mahatmya has, I have not come across it, but Bhima Mahatmya does have a continuing presence in some kind of rituals, because a brief Marathi version was published around 130 years back. Okay, 135 years back. So it must have been a part of certain rituals, otherwise the text will not be kind of translated and published. So there are kind of, people have told me maybe there is some kind of parayan or the repeated reading of these texts go on, but I have not come across with the people who do it. So what I believe that this includes the oral traditions from the older sites. That's what I believe.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Now we can go forward to the questions.
Yes. Okay, the first question from Anirban, right?
Yes, ma'am. The first on the screen, ma'am,
please.
Shiva Aruni is asking.
Okay. Hello, Aruni. It is very nice to see you here, Dr. Aruni, and having been here for all this lecture. Okay, Dr. Aruni is asking me, can we treat Bhima Mahatmya as Sthala Purana because it refers to more than one sacred place? I think yes, this is a very valid question, but I am not an expert into the kind of this labeling thing, because this is a domain of textual scholars, and generally these Nadi Mahatmyas or Sthala Mahatmyas have been clubbed together by people right from Jan Khunda to R.C. Dhere who was a stellar scholar who mostly wrote in Marathi. So they are treating everything as together because essentially the purpose is same. One or more than one sacred place is being kind of glorified through the descriptions of myths.
Yeah.
Oh yes, Ellora. I think that is up to the people who are working on Ellora to look into the Ellora Verul Mahatmya. There is a text called Verul Mahatmya, and I believe there are certain people who are looking into it. Okay, I think every Sthala Purana, every text will have its own, it will require its own methodology to be deciphered or to be understood in accordance with the archaeological remains or the historicity. For me, what is important is that the same cultural milieu is giving rise to texts, to artifacts, and to myths. And we need to understand the interlinkages, and we need to map them and understand the interlinkages within them. That is what I find very interesting.
Yes.
Okay, is Anegundi of, I believe so. Is Anegundi of Copper Plate same of the present Anegundi of Koppal district in Karnataka? Okay, I do not know. It does not mention anything. It just mentions one Janamejaya Chakravarti of Anegundi. Now Rajwade tried to place him as a Chalukya because there is a inscription, the land grant comes, copper plates come with a boar seal, Varaha seal. But there are three Janamejaya Chakravarti's 3 copper plates or 3 land grants which have been deciphered by L. Rice from Mysore Journal in 1939. So I do not really know whether they are. See, this whole idea whether this is a spurious or this is a genuine is still debated. So I will not be surprised if there is a discrepancy between the information on the ruler that is given there and the actuality of the political conditions of Anegundi. I will not be surprised. Anyone else?
I think we are done with the Facebook questions. Here, ma'am, Anirban Ghosh has asked 3 questions in the private chat box. He's saying, as you mentioned, the Bhima Mahatma was the Uttarakhanda of...
No, I said that... Okay, I can read the questions. I'll read the questions and answer. First, we mention that Bhima Mahatmya is not the Uttarakhanda of Sthala Purana. Bhima Mahatmya is a Sthala Purana, or it's a Purana text or which sanctifies and glorifies local places, and they say that they are a part of the Uttarakhanda of Padma Purana. Okay, there are Puranas, there are very major Puranas, if you know. Okay, 18 major Puranas and the various Upapuranas in Indian Puranic traditions. So most of these Sthala Puranas will say they are either Padma Purana, part of either Skanda Purana or Padma Purana. So here they are saying they are part of Uttarakhanda of Padma Purana. If you actually go to the text of Padma Purana, you will not find this text. Okay, this is a way of seeking legitimacy for these texts. And there is a break in the gap of, I did not understand, continuous cultural remains or cultural composite. The site chronologies are in accordance with the archaeological remains or the archaeological chronology that is typical to the area of Western Deccan. There are no aberrations. Okay, what do you think earlier, the text or the myth? I believe the myth was earlier, and the myths were kind of compiled and documented in the text. Otherwise, we wouldn't have found them everywhere, the similar myths everywhere. Because in Palasdev, as I am again saying, Kosambi says that even residents told them the same myth as that was being corroborated by Bhima Mahatmya. So I believe myths came first and text came later. I think I'll pass about epics and archaeology of Ramayana and Mahabharata because that's a kind of a completely different domain, and we do not really know. You will need a whole another session to speak about Ramayana and Mahabharata and why would or why would not we find remains. Okay, So this is I would really like to pass this question for this session. Okay. So anything else? Anyone else?
Aditya Shankar Chattopadhyay has a question. He asks,
Okay.
ma'am, can you say something on the relevance of archaeological excavations in medieval Deccan?
Oh, obviously, whatever we know about Sultanate Deccan or medieval Deccan is largely through texts. Okay, there are very few extensive horizontal excavations in medieval archaeology in Deccan, or for that matter in India also. For the problematics of early medieval excavations and all this, I would also ask him to read a text by Jason Hawkes of situating early medieval. He has, I think, published in Asian Perspectives. So there he has described in detail the problematics of early medieval. Many things also apply to the medieval era. What has happened is there are too many documents available for the medieval periods. So kind of they have always had the upper hand in setting the narrative of medieval history, and what we get is essentially a historical viewpoint from the elite perspectives or from those who were literate, but we really do not know about the settlement dynamics, the population, the demography, how the small settlements or the hinterlands operated, the internal arrangements of the settlements. We do not know anything about it. Only archaeology will be able to provide the answers, and we need to have excavations. So excavations will really help in this matter, I believe.
Yes. So that is all with the questions. So
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, once again for this engaging session.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for
to all
inviting
the
me
viewers,
here.
thank you for watching. And
Yes, thank you for watching.
yes, ma'am, our pleasure, ma'am.
Thank you.
So before concluding, I would like to mention on part of Voyages that we have another lecture scheduled on the 1st of July at 5:30 p.m. titled Wives and Workers, Women's World of Labor in the 19th Century India, to be delivered by Professor Shomita Sen, Faculty of History, Cambridge University.
Okay.
So,
That would be, I
thank
believe
you
that
so
would be
much.
very interesting. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Yes, ma'am.
all of you stay safe.